Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A real pleasure to talk to you today. How you doing?
I'm good, Sarah. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Love the film. So unique. I guess it very much fits kind of within a genre of kind of a boxing, sports drama. But I love the fact that it's kind of a completely fresh twist on it. Not only because, it's sort of these women who are kind of on standby, filling in the gaps in like the televised boxing recordings, but then also because we're not really there in the ring like we would normally be or in the center of the action. It's everything that's going on in the background. So when you first read that script, what jumped out to you? Did it seem so unique from the off?
Yeah, I think so. Like when I first heard it was a boxing film, I was like, there's no way because I'm not going to be able to box and I don't look like a boxer, so we'll just see. But then when I started reading the sides for the audition, it became clear immediately that it was so much more about like inner struggles that this character Tony was fighting, and it was far more like, yeah, her like mental obstacles, her anxiety, her insecurities, and her like troubled backstory and relationship with her family that was the real battle she was going to be going through instead of boxing. And so once there was all that like interiority there, which was plain to see, I was, yeah, really excited then to take for it and take part.
And it made me realize that perhaps when we do normally watch these sorts of films, maybe either everything's sort of like exaggerated or a bit too heightened or even romanticized in some ways. Whereas there's such a grit and realism to this. And I know I'd read that Maurice, he was doing this documentary and that was almost what gave him the sort of spark of the idea. So how did you kind of reach that level of authenticity? Did you kind of have to go and spend some time, amongst these people? Did you have to do a lot of research? How did you kind of find this world?
Yeah, well, I think what was a really interesting kind of shoe into it was that like the entire kind of like boxing scene that we see is complete performance. Like every boxer that I had met while we were training, like for months beforehand, was like the most like, I mean, the ones I was meeting in the ring were lads, but they were like the most gentlemanly, like kindest, calmest people ever. And it's because like, you know, you kind of you get into boxing to sort of like, or at least some people do, to kind of like, you know, right personal wrongs for yourself and almost like become a better person. It's a very like dignified and noble sport. And I know when we're watching that from the outset, it's like it's all punches and it's bloody and it's grim and all these people have these like, two fighters will have this feud that goes on forever, but it's all part of like the bravado and machismo of it and this like performance. But like what's inside it all is very pure and very truthful. And so I think kind of understanding that layer of performance and especially approaching that as an actor, knowing I'd be performing that performance, that kind of helped me relate to it a whole lot more.
And specifically coming to terrible Tony, I mean, there's a fierceness to her, but like we've kind of said, there is also this vulnerability underneath. And, she's kind of coming from nothing. And you can see that there's a naivety to her, even when she's interacting with her coach, she's perhaps looking for, a bit of that, older person she can look up to, a mentor, maybe a mother figure. So how did you kind of tread that line, get that balance between her both seeming quite tough and badass, but also being quite vulnerable?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think like Morris and I worked a huge amount on finding Tony's backstory and her reasons for coming to boxing, and therefore what people like Emma, played by Sinead Reardon, would represent for Tony, or like what the because boxing symbolizes or represents something different for every boxer, and so it was kind of finding out what that was for Tony, and then it kind of once she's trying to get into boxing and she wants to not no spoilers, but she wants to do a proper job and she wants to do it properly for herself, and then when she comes up against obstacles against that, that for her in turn means that she's not able to be her true honest self, and she's not able to take this like moral right path and choose her own destiny in a way, which is what, yeah, causes her to struggle so much in it. And like even like Chrissy's scene, you can see that like that gorgeous scene, you can see that done so well, where it's kind of that like frailty behind all of the performance and all of the pressures and all that kind of stuff, and how it was actually really affecting people, because it does affect people like that, and people do break down like that. Boxers do that all the time. So
And from the physical aspects, I mean, looking at you now, like what a transformation it obviously was, now I can see the contrast. Where did you begin with that? And does it almost kind of help a bit though as well when you kind of, you change your hair, you change, the way you're holding yourself perhaps? Because it's not like we said at the beginning, you're with getting so many scenes where you're sort of having to go all out on the boxing front, but we need to believe that that's what she's capable of. So,
yeah,
did you kind of approach it in that sense?
it was very tricky because as an actor as well, you don't want to feel like you're putting anything on, like you don't want to feel like you're faking anything. But then at the same time, like what helps me relate so much to Tony is that like her and myself were insecure about all the same things. Like, I guess as a boxer in that scenario and in that setting, you do want to appear as tough as possible. So you do just put it on. So it was kind of like, as the actor, I was putting it on, and any kind of like insecurity where I felt like, oh God, I don't know, I don't feel that tough. Like we'd done the training, so at least that had kind of really helped me understand. Like I could shadow box and I could have a go at a sparring match if it came to it. But like, I think almost using that kind of, oh, is this am I pulling this off, that like question where it's like, am I convincing people that I could win this fight? Like am I convincing, you know Vicious Vicky, am I convincing my coach, am I convincing everyone else in this room that I could actually win this fight? That's a question that still is important to have whilst you're acting in those scenes.
And after doing the training, did you kind of get a taste for it? Were you like, oh, this is actually quite fun? I feel like I would really like the idea of the training around boxing, but I've never want to be up against an opponent.
No,
So maybe
the,
that's the distinction.
I know. Well, the training was really fun because it uses so much of your body and your core and balance and all this kind of buzz. So like it's exhilarating because you're completely wiped after it. Um, and then I remember like one time, my coach Terry O'Neill had like the pads up here, and he's kind of like doing this, and I have to like duck. And one time I didn't duck in the right way, and he accidentally hit me in the face, and I was like, "Ow, ow, that really hurt. Why did you do that?" He's like, "Yeah, you are definitely not going to be able to ever do the fighting side. It's just the training side for you." So yeah.
And I love your fellow cast. I mean, because it's so stripped back, and we are kind of, we don't have sort of effects and like huge sort of things going on in the background. It's so reliant on each of you and how you bring a performance and how you bounce off each other, and particularly you and Chrissy, and of course with Sinead, like such amazing scenes. And as we said as well, maybe because we think of this as a very kind of macho sort of male dominated sphere, seeing these tensions between women feels like it's like a whole new slant on it. So how did you find acting opposite these people?
Yeah, that's such a good point because I think like for the boxing scene generally, it will take a really long time before we see like equal representation of male boxers and female boxers because obviously people like Katie Taylor and Clarissa Shields and all of these amazing female boxers are doing such a good job of inspiring young women, but then there's like a delay in how long it will take these women to get up to like a professional boxing level. So there was definitely like a very palpable tension working with just women in the room about kind of like, we're all at each other, but on another level somewhere there must be, there's got to be something where like we do want women to do well. Like we don't want to just get there and then pull up the ladder behind us. In terms of like the acting realm of it, it's a very interesting dynamic. But then in terms of like, being an actor there and working with these other actors, they were just like amazing. It was just so much fun to kind of the bloody girls. Do you know what I mean? It was just so much fun. They're like really, really brilliant performers. Everyone was so into it and everyone was so gutsy and so like, brave sounds like a silly thing to use, but like it was tricky. None of us had done anything like that before. But I think we all really supported each other and really, found that kind of sisterhood, which was really amazing. It was really family vibes on that set. And so working with all of them and kind of we'd be helping each other like with shadow boxing in between takes and all that kind of buzz and showing each other techniques and stuff we'd learned. So yeah, it was a really lovely, healthy, wholesome vibe working with them all.
And because it's set in so few settings, there's sort of a claustrophobia to it when you're watching it. And I wondered if it was almost a bit like that on set too, almost like more like a play, perhaps, than
Mm.
shooting a movie, which probably had its pros and cons, but maybe that almost added to the atmosphere of you all kind of like having all this time with each other, having a bit of a shorthand with each other, being able to bounce off each other.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think it kind of added to that. Like obviously in the film, no one really knows each other that well. I mean, the boxers would know each other, the publicity of each of their like campaigns and all that kind of buzz. But it was great kind of getting to hang out with everybody so much and make it so intimate because it's such a sweaty, intense, like confined space in the film. So you would be like rubbing shoulders up against everybody all the time, and it would be driving you a bit insane. Not that it was driving any of us insane at the time. We were like playing Mario Kart in the green room, so it was really nice. But like it you needed that sort of that like frisson between each of your castmates. You needed to be able to sense where they were and feel where they were because as you know in the story you're on show the entire time and you can't let it slip, so you need to be able to like feel the other people in the room all the time, so kind of it being such a tight set in that way was really helpful.
And in terms of what people can take away from watching it, I mean, it does feel like it's one of those where you're just so drawn into it and and you're there with the character, you can feel the tension, and it is kind of this underdog story in a way. So what do you hope people take away, and how have you found it connected with audiences?
I think the main thing, or like one of the main things people were saying was that like they couldn't believe it was such a low budget film. And I think it's because the quality of acting, the quality of cinematography, writing, directing, producing, everything was just so top notch and like such a sophisticated level that it like as a film it punches way above its weight in terms of what we actually made it for. And I think another takeaway as well is it's a really unique story, a very like exciting part of boxing, which I think would appeal to both boxing fans and non-boxing fans. It being an all like female-led cast, and about like a very Irish one as well, Cork specifically. So there's so many kind of very unique elements, but it speaks to so many broader universal themes about representation of women and I don't know, like a nuanced crime genre as a whole as well. There's so many things going for it.
And how, in terms of how it fits in with your career, I mean, I know you were in Normal People and you've done some short films. This is kind of maybe your, feature debut in a role like this. So how do you think, what do you think you'll take away from the experience? And, how do you think it might be a springboard to then take on even bigger roles or in bigger productions, et cetera, et cetera?
It really taught me what being on set and I guess therefore being an actor was all about. Like it's so much about the collaboration with people. You're only as strong as like what you into it, like the strength and effort you put into the entire production. Like I'm so grateful for all of the small roles I got to play on those other things. But when you're only there for like a day or a couple of days at a time, it's so different to being there for the full 4 weeks or whatever it might be, like 6 weeks or 6 months or something like that. And it really taught me how important that like family bond is between everybody on set and how much like, how movie making, filmmaking is like an organic thing. And it was just great to be like completely immersed in that. Kind of like baptism of fire, but I just really enjoyed it and it's just taught me like so much. It was great.
And in terms of other things you've done, maybe other highlights, I mean, what was it like being involved with Normal People? I mean, I know everyone how popular Sally Rooney was to begin with, but I don't know whether you had predicted how much that show would explode. What was it like being a part of that?
Well, I guess I didn't really have a massive frame of reference because I think that was my first screen job ever. But it was such a privilege to be on that set because it felt so amazing at the time. Like I was literally only there for half a day, I think. But like in that small amount of time, you just get a really good vibe. It's that same kind of thing of everyone was getting on with everyone, like everyone was chatting to everyone. And I think, the content of the story meant it was so important and precious to people. And yeah, it just felt like everyone was very protective over it and wanted to make this really beautiful thing. Everyone was so passionate about it. It was so nice to be a part of. It was it was a wonderful project.
And I know you've also done some stage stuff, that adaptation of Emma, etc. So is that something you also want to do more of? Do you sort of like the fact that you can, TV, film, stage, like kind of keep that broad spectrum of things going?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't know if theatre would be on the cards for me after trying to get into TV and film so much. So that was great crack getting to do that because again, it's that kind of it's the routine of it all, and it's the fact that like yeah, there's the end product, but there's also like I mean, theatre just it feels like it goes on forever. Like that Emma run was like 2 months, so it was kind of every day with the same people and trying to consistently make something to like a high standard every single night, depending on like what you're going through during the day. Like it's a completely different, yeah, kind of routine, I guess. But it was great. I love those as well.
And in terms of what's next, I know there's one big thing that we're not allowed to mention. So, but I know that's in the air. Um, Anything else that's in the pipeline, or where might your ambitions lie? Is there a director you'd love to work with, a genre you'd love to try? What's on the bucket list?
I think like, and I think it's just because I watched it again recently, The Souvenir. I would love to work with a director like Joanna Hogg because I love improv so much. Like I have my own improv comedy troupe and we do shows like around Dublin all the time. It's so interesting kind of blending improv with acting in all different spheres because you realize how important it is. And then watching films like The Souvenir where so much of it is improvised, or even films like the Before trilogy, where you're kind of just working on a relationship and improving around that. Like, I'd love to work on something like that, like really blend those two things in some way, either like film or theater in the near future. That would be really cool. But fingers crossed, who knows?
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me. Huge congrats on the movie, and I can't wait for everyone else here in the UK to see it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sarah. It was lovely chatting to you.